the different political groupings representing different views about the way the country should move forward. You've got the Bolsheviks, you've got the Mensheviks, and all sorts of others. Can you just give our viewers a rundown of who are the major players at this point and what do they stand for?
Well, you have, if you like, starting on the centre-right, you have the cadets, which were the constitutional Democrats. And they were really largely part of what I mentioned earlier of the Octobrists, of liberal conservatives from the 1905 manifesto, and they're believing in having a proper parliament, a proper government elected by the people. And then, of course, further to the left, you have the Socialist revolutionaries. Now, they were vast because they had basically the support of virtually all of the peasantry. And they, when it came to the elections in the Constituent Assembly, they had the largest vote of all. But they, at that particular stage, were in the process of splitting, and you had between the left SRs, or Socialist Revolutionists, and the right SRs. The right SRs were moderate socialists. And when it came to the Civil War, they actually would be part of the White Alliance, and we'll certainly discuss that later. But the left SRs were basically going to join up with the Bolsheviks until they realized quite how appalling the Bolsheviks were going to be. And then further to the left, if you like, certainly in Marxist terms, I mean, it's very difficult to sort of to map them all, because rather like with the Spanish Civil War, you know, you have actually three different axes of conflict. It's not just between left and right, it's also between centrists and regionalists, and also between libertarian and anarchist, which was very much the case in Spain. It was also the case in Russia. So yes, you do have anarchists in Russia who in many ways are almost to the left of the Bolsheviks, believing in no government at all and in self-managing cooperatives. But you have the Bolsheviks, but then you have the Mensheviks, who actually were, I think one would best describe them as parliamentary socialists. Yes, they were sort of Marxists, but at the same time they believed in a parliamentary system. And then there were one or two other smaller socialist parties, but we don't need to necessarily...
We don't, but who were the Bolsheviks? Tell us more about them.
Okay, well, the Bolsheviks were the most extreme part of what had been the Social Democrat Party, which had split into the Mensheviks, which were regarded as the minority party, and the Bolsheviks, which were supposedly the majority party. But that was the way that the Bolsheviks managed to sort of label the two sides, and those labels stuck. But I mean, the thing was that the Bolsheviks were the best organized by far. They had a coherent ideology. There were disagreements and so forth, but basically it was pretty coherent. They had a very strong leader in the form of Lenin, who was not going to take any trouble or nose for an answer. But even he had to negotiate to a certain degree with their central committee, which was vital. And Lenin appears arriving at the Finland station, having come all the way from Switzerland via Germany, because the Wilhelmine regime of Kaiser Wilhelm realized that if they wanted to knock Russia out of the war, the Bolsheviks were going to be the best way, and then they could turn around and bring all their forces, or the bulk of their forces, from the Eastern Front to face the British and the French, and possibly the Americans who were about to arrive in the First World War, in fact, which didn't really take place until 1918. But this was the time when already there was that sort of major shift coming. So the Germans then did support the Bolsheviks, and with money as well. There's no doubt now about that. And Lenin, when he arrived at the Finland station, started to make his speeches. Now, his speeches were so extreme that even members of the Bolshevik Party were sort of shocked and thought this was madness, because he wanted the abolition of the police, he wanted the abolition of money and of the finance and all the rest of it. So there was no question for him of adapting the state, if you like, and reorientating it in line with the new ideology. He wanted the total destruction of the past. And this is why he encouraged and welcomed the destruction in the countryside as well. Because he wanted to make sure that the past was irrecoverable. It was also one of the reasons why the imperial family were later slaughtered. It was to make sure that nobody could go backwards or hope of restoring old regimes in any way. And people were shocked. And actually, because the Bolsheviks were so few in number, and because Lenin's speeches were so extreme, nobody took him seriously as a threat, and nobody took the Bolsheviks seriously as a threat. Until the July days, when the Bolsheviks did make an attempt at an uprising. But it was really cack-handed. I mean, it had gone off, shall we say, it would have gone off prematurely. It wasn't even properly planned, and Lenin was horrified. He had to flee to Finland in disguise. It was quite funny. I describe how Stalin is the one who has to shave off his beard. And one wonders if any his hand had slipped at that moment, history would have been very different. So, at that stage, it looked as if the Bolsheviks were finished. Trotsky was arrested, most of their leaders were arrested, and Lenin was in hiding. But during the course of that summer, and this shows Lenin's genius, he promised 3 great lies. And the 3 great lies were, he promised to the soldiers at the front peace, when in fact he wanted to turn the imperialist war against Germany into an international civil war. He promised land to the peasants when he never had any intention of allowing the peasants to have land. In fact, this was a policy which he'd pinched off the left socialist revolutionaries, knowing that it was going to be popular, but had no intention of carrying it out. And he promised the factories through the Soviets, which means their committees, to the workers, as if they were going to own their own factories. We had no intention of allowing them to do that. It was going to be the party and the state combined together who were going to control everything, with him up at the top. And I think the thing is that Lenin, with his genius, but also his arrogance, because he could never believe that anybody else would have the ability, the organization, the managerial, and the ability to look forwards, because he was extraordinary in that particular way, to make the key decisions. This was why he envisaged a total centralized control.